sort of get some ideas as to how Portland can respond, and pieces that you can take from that in your response to what's going on?
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at these other cities that have been affected, like Los Angeles and Chicago, and we are taking notes and learning lessons. And one thing that we've been doing here in East Portland is we have been training people up. We're training like democracy depends on it, because it does. We are teaching de-escalation to hundreds of volunteers. We are training people in nonviolent direct action. And in fact, this weekend here in downtown Portland, we'll be hosting 200 activists from all over the state. We're going to be talking about nonviolent direct action, nonviolent civil disobedience, and all the skills we need for victory in the coming weeks. We're very excited about this. We're bringing trainers in from all over the state. This is going to be a magnificent weekend, and we're going to leave it more prepared than ever for October 18th.
Oh, wow. Terry.
Check it out on our website if you can, resistancebootcamp.us.
Say it
really
again.
Excited, y'all. Yeah.
Okay, say it again, because we want people to move to action.
Yeah, it's called resistancebootcamp.us. We're very excited. We're gonna be teaching people everything from first aid for protests to how to be a citizen journalist. 16 sessions, 200 activists, a dozen trainers. It's really exciting.
Say it again.
Resistancebootcamp.us. Right here in Portland, we're going to be training up like democracy depends on it.
All right now. See, that's what we want, because, TJC, we're all about not only igniting change, but inspiring action. And we believe that the only answer to these wannabe dictators is to show them no. And then they show it in the streets. So thank you so much for that. And Terry, you were there in 2020. And I'm sure, Toro, Malcolm, you saw 2020 when he tried to do this nonsense back then. Terry, just review for us what in the world happened back in 2020 and the lawsuits. I mean, there's a lawsuit going on right now by the governor and the mayor and the police saying, stay out of Portland. You have no business being here, no real emergency, et cetera, et cetera. But remind people how out of control the situation was in 2020.
Yeah, it was in 2020. If you recall, when in Minnesota, a police officer murdered George Floyd in 2020, and cities across the country staged protests against police brutality and police murders of especially unarmed black men. Portland was no exception. Portlanders protested every day for weeks and weeks. Those protests, I went to some of them. Remember, this was 2020. It was the height of the pandemic. The vaccines were not out. People were a little nervous about being in big crowds. Those protests in Portland were organized so that we stood 6 feet apart from each other to keep one another safe. We wore masks. We marched across the bridge. We marched into neighborhoods in Portland. It was dogs welcome, kids in strollers welcome. It was really a fun protest. These are daytime protests. There were nighttime protests as well that were aimed at the Justice Center downtown. That's the Portland Police Bureau headquarters. But those were 99% peaceful. Who was not peaceful at the time were the Portland police and then the federal agents that Trump sent into Portland. The ACLU filed a lawsuit in 2020 against the Portland Police and the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Marshal Service because they were targeting journalists and legal observers of the protests. The police were actually targeting those journalists to shut them down and stop them from filming what was going on with the police attacks on protesters. Just one example, this is in July 12th. By this time, the feds had been sent in to Portland, like in the early morning hours, like midnight, July 12th, 1 o'clock in the morning. Federal agents storm out of the PPB headquarters, the Portland Police Bureau headquarters, and start attacking protesters, but they also attacked journalists. In the complaint, Matthew, I think his name was Matthew Lewis Rowland, was shot 10 times by federal agents. With so-called non-lethal ammunition, extremely damaging. That was going on. The plaintiffs were able to get a preliminary injunction against the police department for behaving that way. Just this year, in January, that lawsuit settled. I don't remember the amount of money that was agreed to be paid out to the journalists and legal observers who were physically harmed by the attacks, but it was a very large settlement amount, and the city council approved it. But I'm hoping that the fact that the police department is now working with the mayor and with the governor in opposing a militarization of the city of Portland, I'm hoping that means that the police department's policies have permanently changed, because it was just horrific what was happening in 2020 in Portland.
Wow. And Toro, you have been talking with the police, the mayor, and others. What do you feel is different this time that will make sure that the people of Portland are protected?
Yes, so I was on the ground in 2020, and I have witnessed the police violence here in Portland. I have a history of 20 years of activism. I've seen a lot of police violence, and so I'm very wary. And so entering into these conversations with the city, we are very wary, but we're willing to give benefit of the doubt as long as they continue to uphold what they are saying they're going to do. And so far, I've been very pleased. We have a new chief. It's Chief Day. He was not the chief back in 2020. And he has been out in the community. He has told me personally, his chief of staff have told me that they have zero interest in giving citations or arresting any Portlanders that are engaged in any sort of non-violent action. Their main concern is actually people who are agitators, who are coming to be counter-protesters. So far they have held true to it. We did not work with the police, especially early on, because of the wariness, but they have continuously shut down bridges for us. The city has told us they will not be issuing any citations for anything that we're doing. They have said wholeheartedly that the Mayor Wilson is behind Portlanders getting out in the streets and exercising their First Amendment rights. So this is why I feel like the climate is a different climate than I have ever experienced before in my activist history. And so I am very cautiously optimistic, and I'm just continue to have these conversations with the city about how we continue to make this a Portland issue and not fight with our local government.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And Jaheem, you're listening to all of this, and you've been in the District of Columbia for a moment now, so you've seen the National Guard and what's going on there and what the ICE raids and everything else that's going on in the district. When you listen and you hear what's happening in D.C., you see what's happening in L.A., Chicago, Memphis, what's about to happen, we believe, in Portland, Oregon, what message do you take to your Gen Z folks and Gen Alpha, too, because they're watching you? What message do you send to them about the times that we're in right now?
Yeah, Daryl, I would tell you, I've seen the fear and tension that comes with the federal troops being in these communities against the will of local leaders. And one thing I would want to mention is particularly minority and communities that are led by black mayors have been targeted. When we look at L.A., when we look at D.C., when we look at the threat to Baltimore, when we look at Chicago, my advice to the people of Portland and other cities across America that is just trying to live, raise a family, go to work, and do what's best for their communities is to stay strong, stay organized, and keep the focus on peaceful resistance. Don't let the intimidation to silence your voice, because it's strategic here. That's exactly the goal, is to intimidate and squander our voices to make us feel like we do not have any real power. One of the things that I want to contribute to our work across the country, especially with the No Kings rally, is, we're working closely with community organizations, elected leaders, and legal advocates to document what's happening, speaking out and saying that we don't have no kings in America. And we're seeing that even this wannabe dictator-in-chief is having a bird. He's having a bird brain moment and saying that these are paid protesters. Hundreds and thousands of people across America are paid protesters. But more particularly, I was just talking to a young man at the summit. At the summit this past weekend, and the message I told him was that we're living in a time that demands everyone to have courage, clarity, and conviction. The challenges that we're facing right now aren't going away on their own, but young people and have the power to organize, to raise their voices, and to push back on this extremist agenda. And so that would be my message to all of our listeners, is to use your voice, push back on this extremist agenda, and remember that we're going to be on the right side of history.
Wow. I love that. And, your workshop was so powerful that one of the leaders of the Hip Hop Caucus was there with us. And he was watching your workshop, and he literally turned around to me and said, this is so good. He was his eyes were wide open. He said, this is so good. I want to make sure that we figure out a way to share this with more young people. That's how good a job you did. And that's why we're so proud of you, Jaheem. We're so proud of, all of our 800 trainees around the country for all of the brilliant advocacy that they do every day. And we're going to hit those streets, Daryl, right, in New Jersey coming up for the early voting, and our young people will be there as freedom riders. But let's get back to Portland some more. One thing that really worried me, Terry, Toro, Malcolm, when I was reading the lawsuit in the settlement and the findings, I was just so really overcome to see the chemical warfare that was used against the people in Portland, the tear gas, the extreme effects it had on even women's reproductive abilities. Terry, when you looked at that, it's so dangerous when we think about, these troops being all over the country right now. And they're in Chicago, they're in Memphis, they're in New Orleans, they're in D.C., they're in Los Angeles, and now in Portland, and that kind of chemical deployment possibility is just, because that was the feds, it's just terrifying. What should we learn, Terry, about that? How do we make sure that such a thing never happens again?
Barbara, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's my daughter and son-in-law actually were living in Portland in 2020, and they participated in some protests. They're not activists. They just, are ordinary, going to work every day, and felt it important to participate in the protests. Well, they started wondering if they should buy those sophisticated gas masks, like you used to see in World War I. It's crazy that ordinary people, residents of Portland, started thinking that way because they understood that their government, at least the police department in their government, was going to do something to try to physically hurt them simply because they raised their voices. And I think that we need to remember also that the militarization of police forces has been happening for a very, very long time in this country. And it has brought us to this point where the President of the United States is only too happy to send actual military troops in to occupy an American city. That began under, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the Omnibus Crime Bill of the 1990s that encouraged military surplus to be the military was making money by selling its surplus to police departments, and the federal government was funneling money to police departments to quote unquote improve their enhance their abilities. So we've had decades of kind of this encroaching merger of military and